Soul Spark Stories, a heart-touching tales that leave a lasting imprint on your soul. Each story is a spark, igniting hope and warmth within you. The studio's ceiling lights were bright but not warm enough to melt the frost between the two women seated across from each other. Pam Bondi entered first, confident as always. Her hair was perfectly combed and her short laugh echoed as she greeted the crew backstage. She had been here many times before and had won every time. This time she brought the same strategy: speak first, often and loudly across the round table. Jasmine Crockett sat still. She didn't adjust her hair, she didn't fix her blazer, she didn't say a word. She nodded briefly when an assistant placed a glass of water by her side, then lowered her gaze to the dark blue folder resting on her lap as if she had opened it, closed it, and knew exactly when she'd use it off camera. No one spoke, but everyone could feel something tightening in the air, not tension from anger but something more charged, like a wire already lived with current waiting for a hand to touch it. The sound technician made one last mic check, quietly whispering to the director, both mics have been on the whole time. No one seemed to notice. Everything stayed on cue except for one person who did notice, and when the red recording light finally lit up, only one of the two knew that what was truly being broadcast today wasn't a debate, it was an unintentional truth spoken at exactly the wrong time. With the mic still on, where are you watching from? Drop a comment and don't forget to subscribe, because what's coming next, not everyone is ready to face what they just said out loud. They called the show the Capitol Table, not because it took place in Washington but because everything spoken there often echoed farther than Congress itself. 4 chairs, 3 cameras, 1 polished round table, and no room for chaos. That day's studio was located in Atlanta, a new facility under a national media network. Recessed LED lights were calibrated to feel half welcoming, half political. The automated cameras were programmed to follow each speaker, but only if the voice was firm enough. The auto-mixing system prioritized continuous speech. Those WHO hesitated would have their volume suppressed. No one said it out loud, but everyone understood. Some microphones don't just record, they amplify power. Pam Bondi arrived early, same familiar stride, confident, commanding, occasionally adjusting her cuff just enough to reveal an expensive watch. She greeted the director, as a peer joked with the sound crew, asked the makeup artist's name, and moments later asked about the other guest on set. Miss Crockett, right? She's still the quiet type, I assume. The technician smiled politely, offering no reply. Jasmine Crockett arrived later, alone, no media handler, no assistant, no aide. She walked in like someone used to being placed in silence and no longer felt the need to break it. She greeted each crew member by name. She had memorized them all from a previous taping. She sat in chair number 3, made no requests about lighting. She simply nodded when the director said welcome back. On her lap was a blue folder, not thick, no label, but her hand rested on it from start to finish. A few meters away in the audio room, veteran technician Nathan Boyd was checking the input channels. He watched the waveform flicker and frowned. Pam's mic was slightly too sensitive. It picked up even the gentle rub of her collar against the earpiece wire, and if it could pick up Tiad, it could pick up every whisper. Nathan had done this work for nearly 20 years. He knew when a mic was designed to clarify and when it was quietly designed to accidentally expose what shouldn't be heard. He intended to replace the microphone, but when the production assistant overheard, she gently said, no need, leave it as it is. Nathan looked at her. No more words were necessary. They both understood. Sometimes you're not supposed to help the system run smoothly. Sometimes you let it stumble. The air in the control room was thick like soundproof glass. LED director Marcus sat quietly reviewing the show's format, segments, borders, federal spending, dialogue, culture in the margins. A note from higher-ups read, skinned 3, let Pam lead, she manages pacing better. There was no note about Jasmine. Marcus didn't object. He was used to this kind of instruction, but he remembered clearly 3 months earlier in a different program, Jasmine's mic had accidentally failed right as she pushed back against a conservative senator over an education bill, and it was Nathan who had drafted an apology letter that was never allowed to be sent. They had met twice before. The first time Pam interrupted Jasmine 6 times in under 4 minutes. guests on the 7th. Jasmine responded in a low but firm voice. The next day headlines read: Crockett loses control on former Attorney General. The second time Jasmine remained silent for half the program. When asked why, she said, "I didn't want to be a product of a script I didn't write." The next day the media called her unprepared. Jasmine never responded to any of it, but today she brought the blue folder. Maya, the young production assistant, had once been formally reprimanded for lacking neutrality in guest interactions. Her mistake making eye contact with a black female guest who was being mocked and not laughing. Since then Maya stopped reacting, but she learned how to record what wasn't in the script. Today she was the one who checked the mix first, and she was also the first to confirm Pam's mic is hot earlier than scheduled and without the usual soft filters. When the cue light turned amber 3 minutes before air, director Marcus flipped through the rundown one last time. He noticed a sentence crossed out in the margin: "If no drama increased policy debate." No one planned to say that line aloud, but everyone silently hoped for something to pop, not to uncover the truth but to find something editable. In chair 3 Jasmine opened her folder for the first time. She didn't look at anyone, just opened read fold. Edit back. Pam noticed. She gave a faint laugh. "Brought your script." This time Jasmine didn't respond, but Maya, 5 meters away, suddenly felt her palms go cold, not from tension but from knowing today something would air that couldn't be edited out. The red light switched on, the cameras rolled, everyone fell silent, but the room was no longer quiet. The host delivered the opening line exactly as scripted. "Welcome to the Capitol table, where we bring political issues to the table of discussion." His tone was steady, but his eyes shifted quickly between the two guests as if even he sensed that something about today was different. Pam Bondi was invited to speak first. She nodded, smiled politely, and like she had practiced the line dozens of times in front of a mirror, stepped into the topic of immigration with a blanket assertion: "We cannot keep indulging weakness in the name of compassion. The border is not the front gate of a church." Within 30 seconds she had shifted direction, no longer speaking about policy. She turned toward Jasmine. "I know someone here always likes to share personal stories, but this country doesn't need emotions, it needs action." Jasmine didn't flinch. Her hands remained on the folder. The host invited Jasmine to respond. She nodded, her eyes directed at the host, not at Pam. "I believe this country is big enough to hold both policy and humanity. If emotion is a crime, then American history may need to be rewritten." Pam chuckled, not an agreement. It was the kind of laugh reserved for someone about to enter the second phase of a plan. "No history again. Funny how every time someone is asked for a concrete solution we end up talking about ancestors." Jasmine said nothing. She simply tilted her head slightly. Pam continued, faster, now more forceful. She didn't wait for the host, didn't wait for a coup. "I don't have a problem with people fighting for justice. I just don't like when pain becomes a personal brand." The air shifted in the room. Whether it was the voice or the lighting no one could tell, but the main camera programmed to automatically follow the Tron guest voice still hadn't cut to Jasmine. It was fixed on Pam's face, capturing every movement, and the mic, the one clipped to Pam's lapel, was fully live. In the control room the director glanced at Nathan. Neither said a word, but both looked at the audio waveform. Channel 1 was peeing evenly, capturing even the sound of Pam swallowing. The host tried to redirect. "Thank you, Miss Bondi. Representative Crockett, your thoughts?" Jasmine opened her mouth, but before she could speak Pam interjected with a line quiet, almost meant for herself alone, always playing the victim. "We know this game." It wasn't broadcast loudly, but the mic caught every word in the control room. Marcus turned to Nathan. "Did you get that?" Nathan didn't respond. He just pointed to his headset inside the studio. Jasmine still hadn't spoken. She looked at the host, her eyes asking, "Did you hear that?" The host parleyed, not because of what was said, but because for the first time something they thought was confined to backstage had slipped into live air. Pam sensed the change. She turned to Jasmine. "What?" "I didn't say anything." Jasmine didn't reply. She pulled out the first page from the folder, didn't hold it up, didn't read it aloud. She placed it gently on the table, dead center near the microphone. "I think the audience at home has heard enough. The question isn't how I'll respond, it's how you're going to deal with a truth that just slipped through this system." Pam gave a tight smile. "Don't pull a morality stunt here." Jasmine nodded slightly. "I'm not performing. You are and this time the mic can't be edited for you. No one in the studio spoke. The camera operator tried to hold a stable shot, but the lens trembled slightly. Camera 2 zoomed slowly onto Jasmine's hand resting on the folder outside the tech booth. Maya clenched her headset. She whispered something not meant for broadcast. This time someone is listening on social media. The live stream started to erupt. A Twitter account posted a 15-second clip capturing the exact moment Pam leaned in to whisper. The caption read, "Did she just say that on live TV?" The #sign unmuted America began trending. Another account wrote, "Jasmine didn't need to raise her voice. The mic raised the truth for her." In a small cafe in Detroit, an older black man nodded as he watched the footage again on his phone. She didn't react because this time she knew the mic had already done it for her. Jasmine's final line wasn't a rebuttal, it was a full stop. Not allowed. One, no exclamation mark. But the audience knew an old page had just turned. Pam Bondi tried to reclaim the moment. She turned to the host with a stiff smile. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. If the mic picked up something it shouldn't have." The host didn't look at her. He was looking at Jasmine, and for the first time in the entire broadcast he said nothing. No introduction, no prompt. Jasmine opened her folder. No rush, no sound. Her left hand steadied the spine. Her right pulled out a single sheet, just one. She folded it into thirds, then placed it neatly on the table right in the center of the frame. Camera 2 pivoted in perfect rhythm with the motion. A close-up. No words. The director whispered into the headset, "Don't cut, no transitions, let it sit." Jasmine touched her finger to top of the page, then gently slid it toward the host. "Before we continue, I'd like to provide some context for how this debate is being conducted." The host received it, hands trembling slightly. It was a copy of a media training document originating from a political organization where Pam serves as a strategic advisor. His eyes scan the top lines. "Apply emotional pressure, force the opponent to react if needed, edit to simulate loss of control, objective. Dismantle balanced image, push sentiment toward extremity." Below that, a list of 3 female politicians, all women of color, and beneath that a signature, "Pamela Bondi, final approval." 3 weeks prior no one spoke. There was no table slam, no theatrical gasp. Only one thing had been removed from the room: the excuse to keep pretending. Pam exhaled sharply. "I've never seen this document before. Maybe someone used my name." Jasmine stared directly at her. "The document was sent from an internal email address within your organization. The IP has been verified. The timestamp matches a Zoom meeting you attended. If needed, I can provide the source." Pam shook her head, her voice rising. "You're fabricating this. It's a trap. The media is being manipulated." Jasmine said nothing. She didn't turn. She simply rested her hand atop the folder and closed it. The gesture was like shutting a box that no longer needed to remain open. The host took a breath and asked, "Is there anything you'd like to say before we move to the next topic?" Jasmine tilted her head slightly, just enough to face the audience. No smile, no tension. "I want to say that I didn't come here to prove I'm right. I came to show that some things shouldn't be dismissed simply because they come from a voice not conditioned to be trusted." She paused, and the silence spread from the lens to the furthest wall of the control room. At that same moment on Twitter, the clip of Pam whispering, "Always playing the victim," crossed 500,000 views. The #sign folder of truth began trending nationwide. A black civil rights attorney commented, "Jasmine didn't need to raise her voice. She laid down a sheet of paper and made the country look in the mirror." Back in the studio, Pam Bondi said nothing. Her hand rested on her lap, tendons, slightly raised fingernails digging into her palm. Camera 3 zoomed in. Her expression no longer matched her words. She forced a smile. "I think we should move on. This wasn't part of the agenda." Jasmine gently shook her head. "Truth isn't part of the agenda, but it always arrives right on time if we leave the mic on." The host bit his lip. He glanced again at the paper still lying on the table. No one touched it. No one denied it. Then a voice from the director came through his earpiece. "This shot doesn't need background music." Silence hits harder. The silence that followed the sheet of paper didn't just exist on the broadcast. It seeped into the control room, spilled into the studio hallway, and quietly flowed toward a corner where a middle-aged man sat alone before the audio console. His name was Nathan Boyd. With 20 years as a television sound engineer, Nathan knew that some sounds are meant to be heard only once and only at their right time he had recorded thousands of hours of conversations, arguments and policy debates, but he learned early on not every sound makes it to air. Some sentences are cut halfway, some slip-ups are softened in post, and the trembling voices of minorities are sometimes lowered in volume for clarity. He used to think that was just part of the job until 2 years ago, when a black guest broke down on air while recounting her experience of being bullied in school. The tech team muted her, saying no need to overdo it. Nathan never forgot that night. Her name was Kenna. After leaving the studio, she emailed him privately, "I didn't cry to be pied, I cried because I knew I'd be edited, and I was right." Since that day, Nathan no longer simply recorded, he listened to remember and sometimes to preserve what others wanted erased. 3 weeks before this taping, Nathan was reassigned to the Capitol table after the primary technician took emergency leave. While testing the system, he noticed a printed document left on the tray of the office printer. No label but the logo of a familiar media organization. The print approval tag read P. Bondi. Curious, he opened it and read the content was an internal briefing on how to manage emotionally reactive guests, particularly female. POC suggested tactics included intentional interruptions, implanting language implying instability, raising the background audio when the guest's voice intensified, injecting redirect questions if they referenced history or personal experience. Nathan closed the document, said nothing to anyone, but he printed another copy and kept it. A week later, Jasmine Crockett was confirmed as a guest. Nathan mailed the document to her office through an unlisted inbox. No sender name, no explanation, just one handwritten line on the cover sheet. "This is what they call training. I call it manipulation." He wasn't sure she ever received it until today, when she placed that exact document on the table under the lights of millions of viewers. No one knew Nathan's name, no headlines mentioned the sound engineer behind the broadcast, but he was still the headphones on, eyes fixed on the audio monitor, and he knew that this time he didn't dial anyone down. Elsewhere in a small library in Chicago, a middle-aged woman replayed the broadcast. Her name was Kenna, the woman whose volume had once been cut for crying. When she saw Jasmine open the folder, she placed her hand on her chest, not out of emotion but from the realization that what she had written had found its way back to air. She whispered to herself, "Thank you for not letting it be deleted. Thank you for keeping the mic on this time." At the same time, an anonymous blog post circulated in media circles. "I was once trained that if a woman of color starts talking about pain, we're to sew up the music and fade out. But today that sound played uncut, clear, undistorted, and for the first time in years I felt proud of what I do." There was no name at the end, only a symbol. At Representative Jasmine Crockett's office, her comms team received hundreds of emails by the next morning. One of them came from an unknown address. No subject, no message, just a single attachment, a raw audio file of the entire show, unedited, uncompressed. The file was titled Episode Uncut Truth.wave. They didn't need to check who sent it, they just needed to save it so that one day if anyone asked, "How did you know the mic was still on?" Jasmine could answer, "Because someone chose not to turn it off." Immediately after the broadcast, the network scrambled to contain the fallout. The official replay on streaming platforms was edited within 6 hours. Pam Bondi's whispered remark was scrubbed. The camera lost a signal at the moment Jasmine placed the document on the table. The title was changed to "A Heated Exchange Between Two Prominent Figures," but it was already too late. Someone in the control room, no one knows who, had exported the raw footage before the legal department even requested edits. The uncut clips spread like wildfire across TikTok, X and Reddit. No editing, no filters, just 47 seconds of pure unmoderated broadcast. Pam's whisper. Jasmine's hand was on the folder, and that final line, "Truth isn't on the agenda, but it always shows up if we leave the mic on." Within 12 hours the clip surpassed 2 million views. In a journalism class at New York University, the professor scrapped the morning lecture to play the footage and ask their students, "Does anyone here think this clip needs music effects or any added emotion?" The room was silent, but one white student in the back of the room spoke. "This is the first time I've seen someone not defend themselves, and the system didn't dare strike." The next morning in a New Orleans cafe, 2 older men rewatched the video on a phone. One said, "We used to say you had to shout just to be heard. Now she didn't raise her voice, but the whole country still stopped." The other nodded, because this time the mic didn't choose the powerful, it chose the moment at Jasmine Crescent at Jasmine Crockett's office. She arrived for work as usual. No press conference, no interviews with CNN or MSNBC, no social media post. She simply sat at her desk. Someone had left a small handwritten note. Thank you for not adjusting yourself to fit the script. Thank you for holding the frequency. No name, no signature, but the slant of the handwriting spoke of someone who had once lived in media's shadows. In Congress, a formal petition was filed, an investigation into media training mechanisms that contain racial and